me take this opportunity to first welcome all the panelists. We've heard Vikan, and that was a very interesting presentation. We have two other very distinguished members of the panel. We have SHREYASI Singh, who leads Harappa Education, is the CEO and founder of Harappa Education, which is doing some path-breaking work, not only among professionals, but among even the student community. She comes off a journalist background and has written books on entrepreneurship like myself. So I was very intrigued when I read her bio. Same with Leo Fernandez. I have known Leo for well over 20 years. He gets younger by the day, I get older. He leads, he's been in corporate life. He was managing director of Accenture for Asia Pac out of Singapore. We worked together in the past 20 years ago. He leads a company called Talentees, again, doing path-breaking work among school children. I think he's touched hundreds of thousands of children's lives for all kinds of skills, including leadership and entrepreneurial skills. The topic that we've got today that we plan to discuss is digital transformation to improve learning outcomes. I was hearing Pa Nadeem, the minister, speak this morning, and for those who could not, my panelists who joined later, he made some very interesting points. I have never heard a minister articulate education the way he did. He spoke of things like, without autonomy for teachers, there is no learning. He spoke about, if there is no engagement with students, with choice, then there is no learning at all. And engagement means developing critical thinking. He spoke about job creation, creating micro entrepreneurs, because there aren't enough jobs. He spoke about how universities have to become project oriented and simulate the corporate environment. How universities don't allow teachers to be challenged. Very interestingly, he spoke about classrooms of the future should not be quiet classrooms, they should be noisy ones. And why it is not engineers we need, but people with an engineering mindset. In light of all that, it makes it even more difficult to talk about how will we achieve these outcomes with the pace of digitization we've got now. Digitization today has overtaken education faster than even gaming, which was by choice by people. And the minister spoke about how it is creating children who are bored, who are lonely, and we are probably going to hit a mental, he didn't speak about it, but what I think, mental health issues with children very soon. Let's go to SHREYASI. SHREYASI, will you be sharing a presentation?
Okay, hi everyone, and good morning, and thank you so much for having me, Nalin, and the entire team. I hope all the other panelists are doing well. I just thought that let me just present a slightly different view of what learning is, because I think learning is a journey for all of us, and I think learning enables us and empowers us, obviously, to do so much. So I wanted to take sort of a moment to make this much more a personal story of what learning has been able to do. Of course, I'm the founder and CEO of a tech-enabled, venture capital-funded online learning institution. But being able to do that, and as Nalin was saying, being able to do that as I charted a fairly unlikely journey to the point that I am an entrepreneur, needed me most of all to learn efficiently and learn all the time and learn things I'd never imagined I would need when I was in college or the early parts of my career. And in trying to do that, in trying to be an efficient learning machine, really to be able to, give wings to my own ambitions, and especially now being able to lead and build a learning company, I feel like I have picked up a few tricks that I think are very, very important to talk about, because I think we have to take learning away from just the systems approach to how each one of us personally adopts it. This is really a nod to the unlikely journey that I have charted, and I always say this, especially to young professionals and people younger than me or older than me or my age, is that if as a non-techie, non-MBA person, I'm the founder and CEO of a digital tech-enabled business. If I can do it, you can. But yes, you have to commit to learning a lot, and being really excited about learning and being very efficient, as you said. And what has helped me, right? What have been my building blocks of learning? And I think for me, especially as adults, for all of us, especially as professionals who learn, at least in the sphere of professional, to be able to achieve something, I think we really have to understand that learning is not about knowledge. It is about action. As an adult out in the world, you learn, you do, you figure out what works, you go back, you learn again. That loop is very strong, and it's not about consuming knowledge or hoarding knowledge, but it's about learning everything and applying everything to action. So I do want us to have a very strong sense, and that's exactly what we do at Harappa as well, is to give our learners, empower them with the ability to take action on the things that they are learning. Again, even at Harappa, and certainly for my own personal learning system, I believe a lot in the power of behavior science, as well as habit creation, whether that's wellness, nutrition, you run a marathon, and being able to gym, workout, into this whole science of behaviors and good habits. And how have I used that? Podcasts are the way. And the other thing that we need to realize is even though as the world is just so challenging and difficult right now, especially in India, our hearts break at what is happening right now. We also know that it is a golden era of learning, and that the learning has been unshackled from the way, of bundles and packs, the way that we assumed it. You can learn from a variety of mediums and formats, and you can learn in a variety of ways, and you can learn from a variety of people. My chosen form of learning, which has really worked for me, is podcast, right? I constantly say I'm like the biggest podcast junkie, and everything's certainly to be an entrepreneur that I've had to learn over the last few years. I have learned through podcasts from some of the smartest people in the world without paying a single rupee in learning, because these resources are obviously available to all of us for free, and you get to hear. And these are, of course, some of my favorite podcasts. And how have I used that? How have I used podcasts, which just seems like an entertainment device and not really a learning device, and converted that into becoming a way for me to actually learn? Is one that, the art of science of learning calls that, you have to create this loop. Of learning behaviors, reinforcing behaviors, contextualizing behaviors, and applying behaviors. So, for example, how have I made podcast my learning behavior? And now we've all been working from home, so that's been one of the biggest casualty of my podcast consumption habit. But otherwise, I had a 40-minute commute to work every morning, and I would listen to a 35-minute podcast every morning, right? It just became a routine. You're spending that time while you're having breakfast in the car, you're also listening to a podcast, and I'll sit in the car and I'd start a podcast. And by the time I went to work, I would have listened. And that became a behavior that I would do, that I didn't leave the learning to chance. I combined it with something that I was doing every day, and I really built that behavior that 8:15 to 8:45, 8:55, I was listening to a podcast 5 times a day, right? And of course, that I kept reinforcing that behavior by ensuring, and I think I've done that maybe 2 years on a trot before obviously work from home after. And contextualizing behaviors, I ensured that I would do is, if there was an issue that I was going through at work, we had to create a performance management system for employees at Harappa. I had to learn about branding and marketing for a B2B clients. That whole week, what I would do is I would look for podcasts that naturally were talking about the issues that were top of mind for me. So I contextualized that learning to my specific situation, right? And I have great power and autonomy as an online learner to be able to do that. And because these were real life problems that I was dealing with in my work life, I could very quickly learn and apply them, sometimes almost in real time, so that the feedback loop is really important. I think that's, to simplify, I think in doing that, we just have to remember, and I constantly think about this, whether it's for our learners, and we have more than 300,000 learners on Harappa Education, or for myself, is there are essentially three parts of learning: the skill, how well you're able to do something, the proficiency of doing something. Now, it doesn't apply very well to podcasts because everyone can be proficient in listening to a podcast. But for example, let's say running, or let's say playing the guitar, or let's say being able to present at a forum, right? And public speaking. What is your skill of being able to do that? First, you must understand that. Then, most importantly, it's not about skill alone. It's about how much effort you put into practicing that skill. Some of us feel like we have actually great skills, but we don't put an effort into practicing them. Some of us don't have great skills, but just the sheer dint of effort, we're able to really enhance our skills because of just how much effort and commitment we put to it. As well as the last is the confidence and the ability to overcome barriers that come in the way of us practicing a skill, right? So that it could be fear of public speaking, it could be fear of negotiation, it could be fear of talking money, if you had to do that with your manager or your employer, or at an interview, right? Like, you might actually have great skills, but you haven't honed them because you haven't made the effort, and you don't have the confidence that if you come into an air pocket, you'll be able to solve it. So whether you're learning anything, and wherever you are on that journey, think about the fact that whatever it is that you're trying to learn, what is really the skill that you have on it? What is the effort that you're putting in it? And what is the confidence that you have that you will be able to do it? As I wind down in just a couple of minutes, what I have learned in being able to run a learning institution where we've been very focused on learning outcomes and completion and engagement of our learners is one that, curate the formats that work for you. The true power of online learning is just the variety, like I said. So genuinely think about, how do you learn better? Do you learn better synchronous or asynchronous? Do you learn better in blended or live classes? Do you learn when you write? Do you learn when you speak? Do you learn when you listen? Everyone learns differently. So please experiment and enjoy that. Set yourself mini milestones. I think learning is really tough. I don't think we say that enough. So be kind to yourself and set yourself up for success, so that you're not waylaid because the challenge just seems so big. And set yourself mini milestones, and set those milestones in behavior what you can control. So can I control that I will listen to a podcast a day? Yes. Can I control that everything that I listen to I understand and I'll be able to do? No. So let me create the milestones that I can achieve. And in trusting that process and being able to run that process, you will eventually learn. They say what gets calendared and schedule gets done. Put that, don't leave learning to chance, right? It's too tough. Put it on your calendar, and that's the only way to ensure that it will happen. We talk about in this world of technology and online learning that data is our biggest source of strength. Of course it is, but I think really motivation is everything. And think really a lot about your own motivation. I genuinely think that thing to crack the real innovation in learning is not data or technologies. It is about motivation. It is about how do we crack the motivation. So ask yourself, why do you want to learn something, right? And like I always say, don't assume motivation. You really need to engineer it, and you'll only be able to engineer it when you know what really motivates you, and as importantly, what are your enemies of motivation or your enemies of learning, so that you can stay away from them. I'm going to stop here and go back to you, Naman.
Thanks, Shreyasi. That was very interesting. I mean, the toolkit is worth emulating and trying to practice. I'll come back to you with some questions that I have. Let's hear from Leo, and then we'll open up the panel. Over to you, Leo. Are you going to share a screen?
Yes, Nalin, I'll just share screen.
Go ahead.
Can you see my screen all right, Nalin?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, so good morning, good afternoon. to everyone. Like Jaspal did, I'd like to convey my condolences, especially to the 53 crew, the families of the crew of the Indonesian submarine. On a happy note, I think delighted to be here, especially with all the my Indonesian friends, particularly from the education sector. Until now, my favorite Indonesians were Iko Uwais, Yayan Ruhain, Alex Abad, Arifin Putra from the Raid movies. So delighted to meet other Indonesian friends from the education sector. So thank you, Nalin, and the team for having me. And greetings to my fellow panelists. Honored to be along with you on the panel. I thought I'd break this brief sharing into three parts, taking the words from the theme, which is digital transformation, improving learning outcomes. So I'm just going to move on to the first slides, and we'll take the word transformation. So I think the first important theme that I think is useful for us to reflect on is that design transformation must precede digital transformation. One of my favorite quotes has been Mark Twain's, "I never let my schooling interfere with my education." And I think for us, as we look at digital transformation in the education field, I think it's extremely important to not treat digital or technology as a magical wand. And I was delighted to hear Pak Ivan talk about that this morning, that technology can't be kind of slapped on to education and automatically solve problems. I think we can't afford to take a Control-C, Control-V approach. We need to be able to genuinely look at what transformation would mean. I've personally walked through many of the schools that we work with at Talentees, which proudly announce themselves as digitally enabled. And you would, as you walk past the classrooms, you will see the digital board, smart board, firmly ensconced at the back of the classroom, with the teacher, still teaching at the blackboard. Some cases, the teacher would use the whiteboard instead of the blackboard, but not much else has changed. And I think the challenge for us is to ensure that we really reimagine what the classroom should look like and aim for transformation and not improvement. I think just the picture that I showed you earlier of the car being pulled along on the bullock cart, imagine putting a 100 horsepower or 200 horsepower engine in that car. You're going to do damage to the cart, to the driver, or the bullocks themselves. So I think it's important for us to be able to look at what we in our experience have found is that the soft part is the hard part. I think just the previous speaker to me from Amazon, Pak GUNAWAN, also mentioned that it is not technology that is usually the hard part. It's usually the people and the processes that are the hard part. And therefore, if we look at the digital transformation opportunity, I think we should not just look at managing knowledge, but stimulating imagination. If we take the Amazon books example, we had Amazon take physical books and digitize them in Kindles. And that was the first kind of step in the journey of transformation. And much the same can happen in education. If we just digitize and ensure that children are able to consume content online, it saves storage, it saves cost, and that's a good beginning. But I think Amazon also went ahead with Audible books. So you're able to personally consume in the way that you like to consume your book. You're able to move behind just reading times, and like SHREYASI mentioned, listen to it in the car while you're driving to work. So the learning experience becomes a lot more continuous. And then finally, Amazon came up with Create Space, where you could create books and publish your own books. And I think there are some useful signals in that parallel for us to look at digital transformation. I'm reminded of the Eric S. Raymond white paper, which he wrote in 1997 about software development, where he said that we needed to move from the cathedral style of software development, which was the traditional top-down, centralized, very structured, to the bazaar style, which was what Linux was doing at the time, right? The bazaar style of technology development. And I think we have the same lesson to learn in the education sector. I was so delighted to hear that word of noisy classrooms from the education minister of a country, because that's exactly what we do at Talentees. We always say that if our classrooms are quiet classrooms, then it can't be a Talentees session going on. It has to be noisy. And I think hearing from Pak Ivan this morning about crowdsourcing, about inputs being taken from teachers, that's exactly the kind of bazaar transformation that is required if education really has to make the best of the digital opportunity. The second theme that I thought we'd take on is the word learning itself. I think most of us would agree that a lot of what we call education, that passes for education in our schools and colleges is push education, right? Where children, young adults are thrown onto an assembly line where we have curricula designed for them. We have teachers trained in a particular way for them, and they're kind of pushed through the system. Rarely do we find a pull form of education. As Winston Churchill would say, personally, I'm always ready to learn. However, I don't always like being taught. And I think that is a beautiful lesson for us when we look at this word learning. The challenge, I think, for us in education, whether in India, in Indonesia, or anywhere in countries with challenges like ours, is to take the classroom and convert it from a teaching place to a learning space. As Erno Rubik would say, that learning is not the accumulation of knowledge. It is building the capacity to find new possibilities in novel circumstances. I think all of us educators on this webinar, I think must ask ourselves, are we doing this in our classrooms? Are we really building the capacity to find new possibilities in novel circumstances? So if we go back to what is the digital transformation opportunity for learning, for all of us as educators, I think going back to Bloom's taxonomy would help. We all recognize that the bottom of the pyramid is all that happens in most of our classrooms sometimes, which is I remember. But are we getting children to understand? Are we getting students to apply? Are we helping them to analyze, to connect and synthesize, to evaluate, to create? That really is what learning, the learning pyramid is about. I remember when I used to teach my son algebra, and I wanted to be sure that he had understood a concept, I would always ask him to set a question paper. And when he set a question paper was when I felt that he had really understood the concepts. So I think the digital transformation opportunity is, how do we make Bloom's taxonomy real in our classrooms? Can we use digital to help children climb the Bloom's pyramid all the way to applying, to analyzing, to evaluating, and creating in the classroom? Pak Ivan spoke about flipped classrooms, and I think that's a huge opportunity to be able to really take the teaching and keep that outside the classroom and convert the classroom into where the learning happens, the discussion, the debate, the collaboration, the peer-to-peer learning. And I think technology has an immense potential to be able to achieve that. And finally, I think learning is an extremely personal journey. I think many of you familiar with multiple intelligence will know that every child in our classroom is intelligent, just in different ways. But our current education system often uses a standard one-size-fits-all approach. And here we have the opportunity that technology could give us of creating that ideal classroom of one, where technology can help children consume knowledge, learning in the way that best suits them, at the pace that best suits them, and helps them develop their own unique gifts and strengths. Third theme that I thought we'd spend time is on those words about improving outcomes, which is all about measurement. And I think we briefly saw this theme in the earlier presentations as well, which is what if we are improving and what if we are measuring from the wrong base? Einstein would say that I never teach my pupils. I only attempt to provide the conditions in which they can learn. And therefore, I think for us in looking at digital transformation, many of us will agree that we're preparing students for a 21st century future with 19th century measurements. Examinations often create what we is called the ludic fallacy that Nassim Taleb in his book, The Black Swan, talked about the ludic fallacy, where we can think we have prepared students, but they are ill-equipped to handle real-life challenges, real-life problems, because we've not given them the skills and values to deal with that. In the outsourcing world that Nalin and I used to be, we used to often joke that metrics and data are sometimes used like the drunk uses a lamppost for support rather than illumination. And we should not fall prey to that same danger in education, where we just measure data, we just look at all the metrics that are possible, but fail to understand what are the insights that we draw, what are the right insights that we draw, and how can it be used to benefit every single student. UNESCO speaks about 4 learning goals, right? The first being learning to know, but the next 3 talk about learning to do, learning to live in harmony, and learning to be. And I think, again, most of us will recognize that our classrooms today generally take that first goal of learning to know, but rarely spend time on the learning to do, learning to live in harmony, and learning to be. And I think, again, the digital transformation opportunity gives us a pathway to be able to try and do that. Also looking at personalized outcomes. My good friend, Dr. Arun Pereira, who used to be a faculty in charge of faculty effectiveness at ISB Hyderabad, he used to talk about the metaphor that as teachers, we sometimes look at children as blank canvases that come into our classrooms on which we have the license to paint. But in reality, each child, each learner comes into our classroom already painted on with their colors, their experiences, their background, their gifts, their talents. And therefore, we are painting on already painted canvases. So when we paint blue, it's painted on a yellow, it's painted on a red. And therefore, technology can really try to develop those personalized outcomes rather than the cookie cutter approach that today's examination system takes. So the digital transformation opportunity gives us the ability to try and get a 360-degree view of student capability, look at dynamic assessment rather than just static exams, customize content for students, help them learn at their own pace. And therefore, I think if we look at these 3 areas of transformation, not just improvement, if we look at learning, not just teaching, and if we look at what we can do to improve outcomes by measuring the right things and measuring all of this, I think, with the child at the center. I think what education and the digital transformation needs most to do is to ensure that we're not putting curricula, we're not putting school infrastructure. It was music to my ears to hear, Pakivan talk about teacher training being more important than school infrastructure. I often joke with school principals that we meet that they are often focused on great school buildings, but that's not the same thing as building great schools. So that's really going to be the effort that we will all need to take as educators. One final word, I think, in terms of the soft part being the hard part, and forgive me if this is a political hot potato, is that I think we also need to treat English not as a language, but as a skill. Very often in many of our countries, when English is not given priority, I think our students lose out both in terms of contributing to a global workforce and also in terms of being able to absorb the global learning resources that are available. So I think it's important to treat English as a skill, not just as a language, and ensure that it becomes part of this digital transformation journey. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Over to you, Nalin. As I think you would say in Bahasa, it's terima kasih. So thank you so much. At Talentees, we're very proud to be part of this journey, working with children and young adults on leadership skills and values, and delighted to be able to spend this time with my fellow panelists and all the guests you have on. God bless.
Thank you, Leo. That was very insightful. Some of those pictures were hilarious, and those quotes brought back memories of school myself. Our company is likely to partner with yours as well as SHREYASI's to bring some of your top-end courses and curriculum and learning content to Indonesia after suitably adapting it to the country. But let's get into a few questions. I'll come to you, Vikan, first. You spoke, firstly, you surprised me with the scale of your vocational program, right? I did not realize that it was that large. But you spoke at length about internship, industry partnerships, and how to bring all of it together. How do you foster this collaboration in the digital age? How do you bring them together? Are you facing? Did you find ready acceptance in Indonesia from industry to partner with the ministry?
Oh yes. Um, yeah, of course we are facing some challenge. First thing is from our side that the teachers, principals, lecturers, their mindset is still back there. So we need new mindset, more open, not only teaching but to develop the learning ecosystem. That's the thing that we have to deal with, and to make our college to be able to understand what industry need, what the labor market want, and then to put it into the curriculum and teaching methodology. That's one thing. But of course, on the other side, from the industries, um, um, actually, it's been progressing. It's been improving. I mean, we are improving that. In the last few years, it gets better. But of course, those industries that we have to keep penetrating them to understand, if they await the products that we cook, that we produce in the back there, it's not correct. Just move forward and then make the recipe together, make the menu together, cook together, and then prepare the internship together, so they can get attached with the talent in the beginning. So that's the thing that we have to keep explaining to those industries. But it gets better in the last few years. It gets quite much better.
That's
and
good.
and then we also have to improve some regulation as well, and also super tax deductions.
Yeah.
That's also quite promising.
The amount of work and the number of areas that your ministry is touching is phenomenal. For those who don't know, Indonesian education system is probably the most diverse and challenging in the world. In India, many people think India is difficult, but then if you broke India up into 17,000 islands, you will know what I mean. It's really diverse, really difficult. Great work there. Pa Gunawan, I heard you speak, and I was very interested by the aim of ultimately making digital creators, or facilitating digital creators rather than just people who are digitally aware. Now, you spoke about human adaptability to technology. With what is happening in the pandemic, do you see that accelerating from your AWS perspective? Are people more adaptable? Are they more open to adopting?
Yeah, I think for obvious examples, we are all being forced work from home, right? The concept of ideas of doing this was never been there before, or at least not easily accepted, right? Most people tends to have a face-to-face meeting rather than having a conference call. But nowadays, it's like the people the other way around, right? It's better to have a conference call or the Zoom call or whatever platform it is. And that's actually one more thing that is unlocking the potential through these virtual meetings. Number one is productivity, obviously. Number two is that is from the access to the reaching out to the subject matter expert and executive globally to support Indonesia companies. It's even bigger, right? Because previously, with the face-to-face, of course, that is facing the challenges of scheduling these global experts to come down physically in Indonesia. But now it's the matter of scheduling it correctly so that that we can cater the different time zones. That's one particular examples, the real examples how we are changing the behavior. But the other key indicators, for example, like how we are seeing that is our user signups is growing significantly for the last 12 months. That's another metrics that we are seeing, where the people adapting to the technologies, not only just only realizing that cloud is important, but we are seeing even now small medium businesses are onboarding to the cloud faster than before.
Thank you. That's good to know, and that's interesting as a trend. Shreyasi, you are more into, as going through your company's website, probably started more with training professionals into specific skills and then moving backwards. And now you have university programs as well, preparing people, campus to corporate kind of programs, preparing them for the corporate world. You spoke about proficiency, skill, practice, confidence, gave a toolkit. How are you able to do this in the digital world? How do you do it digitally? Or is it just a phase you have to wait it out?
Thanks, Alan. We work both with students in higher education institutions as well as professionals who are employees in enterprises. So in that sense, that we transcend learners between 18 to 45 really, and therefore have a lot of people that we can observe. No, I actually feel like a lot of the elements in the toolkit of learning that I spoke about, and if you were to drill down just on the skill, effort, and confidence bit, I think we have to understand. I think Leo was saying this, and I missed some of the earlier discussions, obviously, in the morning. But I think it's really important to understand what you use technology for when, right? Like I said, that of course it can't just be a magic bullet. It is not a magic bullet that works for everything. And I think the couple of true advantages of using ed technologies or online for learning is being able to set some of these frameworks in process. So for example, if we were to say about skill, right? Now constantly, for example, speaking effectively is one of the flagship courses on Harappa. That's a course that a lot of people, I think, feel the need and the pain of if they're don't have the confidence that they're able to speak well, and we've got so many people to get on. Now a skill like speaking is however great one course is or not, there is no way that you can make a meaningful difference in being able to acquire that skill through a one-time intervention, right? It is a skill that needs almost a continuous drip feeding of both exposure to content, good exercises, and then for you being able to practice, right? And you need that over a long period of time. And not for all of those things can you obviously always have an instructor or a faculty with you. So for example, we have created something called the habit drills, right? And if somebody is on our speaking course or program, can you every day send them a 5-minute habit drill in which they can actually do and practice rather than just consume, because some skills like this can only become better because you do. We have created a video submit feature, because one of the big things cognitive neuroscientists will tell you, especially on skills like speaking, is if you watch yourself do how you've done, that is, and you mirror your own sort of, work product to yourself, that has a huge trigger to improvement. So the platform asked me in a fully asynchronous manner a question. I'm able to record my 40-second, 1.5-minute response. I'm able to submit that, right? The platform gives you some automated response, but more importantly, what it constantly keeps triggering you to do is saying, hey, watch what you said, watch yourself do it. It's like practicing in the mirror, right? And then repeat again, and then repeat again. And that kind of practice is almost impossible for us, given sort of the challenges both in Indonesia and India of the large number of people that we need to train. You need to be able to set up systems that work asynchronously and go towards practice of skills, effort, right? You can give goal setting for learners on the platform to do. So you can immediately capture an intent, right? You have to, especially when you work with adults, you can't treat them like captive prisoners in a classroom, right? You have to give them agency so that they can you say, hey, what is your learning goal for this week? Do you want to spend 45 minutes? Do you want to spend 30 minutes? Do you want to spend 60 minutes, right? And then once somebody does that, it's almost like on Instagram or whatever you did, hey, today, you have a timer, your 15 minutes are up. Can you say, listen, this week you didn't come back to the platform and did your 60 minutes. You only have 3 days to do. Can we send you 2, whatever? So there are, I feel like on some of those on being able, this mass personalization at scale and this mass trigger towards the right learning behavior is almost only possible if you use technology, especially if you want to work with a large number of them. And we do some of that.
I experienced some of it myself. I tell some of my sessions that the best way is watch one of your own videos when you were at a party or something, and you won't recognize yourself. And if you hear yourself, you won't believe it's you, because in our minds we all have this heavy booming voice. But when you actually hear yourself, you sound like almost squeaky. That's the way recording.
Oh, you have so many filler words, right? There's only that much you learn, and there is a thing about role modeling. So there's only that much you learn from watching great orators like a Barack Obama, but there's much more you learn from watching and observing yourself, right? So I think this practice of self-reflection and self-observation is very critical to learn.
So coming to you, Leo, you made interesting points. It was not just one topic of English skills which was debatable from your side. The point I liked was you need a design transformation before digital transformation. All the tools, technologies, infrastructure is set for a particular curriculum to be taught in a particular way in a particular setting. Suddenly you go digital. People are doing the same thing except that they're in front of a camera. What needs to change? What is this design transformation that you see happening?
No, thanks, Nalin. And I think that's extremely critical for us. I think you and I, we've had some experience in the outsourcing business before, and we used to always tell our clients that if you throw dirty linen over the wall, it's going to stay dirty on the other side, just in someone else's backyard. So we used to always insist on re-engineering, on transformation to precede that kind of an outsourcing journey. And I think the same thing needs to happen in education. The biggest challenge, I think, as most of the speakers have highlighted, is the battle in people's minds. I think for us to be able to look at the classroom as a place where the child is the boss and not the teacher, where the child's needs and are more important than a curriculum's requirements. I think that is the first transformation that needs to happen in all our classrooms, whether in India, Indonesia, or anywhere, where we realize that we are in the service of the child. I think that's the first big transformation. The second is for the teachers to redefine their own roles. I do know that several teachers have an insecurity that technology may replace them, that technology will make them less important. I think that is a myth. You're just dancing with ghosts on that one. I think the teacher's role needs to be redefined, but it will only strengthen. I think technology will only be a tool. So teachers need to redefine and say that, look, I don't need to be the person who knows everything. I don't need to be the person with all the knowledge at the tips of my fingers. I just need to be able to facilitate that happening for the student. And here are a lot more tools at my disposal. So I think these are the kinds of transformations, and particularly for policymakers. I think policymakers rarely take that ground up view. It's very much a top down, what I call the cathedral style of policy making. Whereas what you do need for education to genuinely transform is a bazaar style. And this is, I think, particularly true of a place like Indonesia, where you're geographically spread out. Local situations will be so distinct that are we listening to the teacher on the ground for what will best serve her in her rural classroom? And one of the voices that I think nobody listens to, policymakers, principals, is the voice of the child. I've seen so many surveys and assessments of a school's effectiveness done where everybody is asked questions except the child. And I think it's important to get that back. So I would say in a nutshell, that's the kind of design transformation that needs to precede any digital transformation. Otherwise, we may just end up with improvements rather than the transformation that we are targeting.
Right. So you make important points. I repeat it myself. In every industry, people go speak to the client and then set up a business and a product. In education, nobody speaks to the students.
Yeah.
Nobody asks them what they want. Nobody asks them what they feel. Till, of course, they scream at home. So in the interest of time, I'm going to come to each one of you for your closing comments and to answer one common question. And just take a minute or a half to close with your closing comments and to answer that one common question. I hear from parents all the time that children today are smarter. They have information at their fingertips. They are smarter than even the teacher in the classroom. On the other hand, we have seen digitization in various industries has made things faster, cheaper, better. We could argue, but generally faster. So my question to you, common to each one of you, to answer with your closing comments is, why does it still take the same amount of time to get the same degree? Engineering 4 years, medical 5 years. Why do we have 10 plus 2? Why do we have K12? Why is not K6 now? If children are smarter, if information is at our fingertips, and everything has become faster, digitized, etc., and in every other industry, things have shortened the time span, why are children being put through the same grind? Nothing has changed for them. Pavikan, I'll come to you first for your closing comments and answer to that question.
Yes, thank you for the very challenging questions. As I mentioned to you that yes, we still implement the same durations of period for studying or learning for our children. It's 12 years and another 12 years at least, and for the higher educations. But as I mentioned to you that first thing is that we improve the curriculum. We do improve the curriculum. So it's more what exactly the labor market or the industry expect. More likely, it used to be a push system, not pull system. So we improve that quite significant. More soft skills, more project-based learning, and etc. And next thing is that as for the SMK, they don't have to go for the campus or university. They are more ready for the job market. And we also implement or we mix some innovations. For example, connecting SMK and campus. SMK 3 years and diploma 2. But not 2 years, but only 1.5 years or 2 semesters. So it's faster, 1 semester faster, and only 1 semester studying in the campus, and the last semester fully they go to the industries with the dual system methods of teaching. So they work while they study. So we make some change. And then we improve the curriculum. And last but not least, I forgot to explain to you that currently our minister is developing a platform that will connect the supply and demand from early phases, from earlier. Industries can put what they want, what kind of graduates they want, and what they expect. Or in the other hand, the students can be also quickly detected by the industry since they start study in the SMK or in campus. So, but the platform I think will be some more time to implement.
Thank you,
I think that's all my answers.
Thank you, Pavikan.
It's very challenging, and back to you, Pak Nalin.
GUNAWAN?
Yes, Nalin, very great questions, and I think from my end, I'm not an expert for educations to be able to speak to answer why, but what I can share is that is from AWS point of view, what we are seeing, that is the demand for becoming faster and faster. It is there. For example, on software development itself, a lot of companies, if we want to cut down the time to market for developing their product or services, right, from months into weeks and into days now. So it's made possible, but it will take a lot of process. And from AWS point of view, we believe in the culture of experimentations. So in this case, for supporting Indonesia's, what we are doing is that we do currently doing a few experiments, not only taking our programs like already available globally through AWS Educate Academy and training and certifications. The Merdeka Belajar program together with the Ministry of Education definitely is one of the experiment that we're doing. We do realize also that is beyond the classroom. IT is actually needs us is one of the industries where the applied skill is actually more relevant than just a degree, right? So what we are doing now in another experiment is working with a local partner like Decoding. We are working together with them, developing a back-end developer programs, where inside that it's already been embedded cloud practitioners and also architecting on the cloud. The expectation is that is people who is graduate from this program will be able to become a back-end developers, which is one of the job role that is required in Indonesia market today. So that's the second experiment. The third one is actually we are also looking at that how our programs through the local partners, Sagasitas educating K-12, absorbing some of AWS Educate programs, but modified in such a way, at least for a starting point, our experiment target is to get these K-12 students, if they graduates, they can at least build a websites. That's a small experiment that we want to do, right? Because we believe on the innovations, it will require small steps of innovation. So these are the existing experiments that we are doing currently for Indonesia, and we do expect that is welcome to the any kind of a partnership so that we can do a lot more experiments. And with this, setting the right goals, setting the right metrics, it's a very important one, so that we will know that it's not only just because of training how many students for the publications and for looking at that good in front of media, but what we are looking for, it's really on the fundamentally which are the one that is will give a significant results for the market itself, which is at the end of the day creating that skills that is ready for the market.
Thank you, Pak GUNAWAN. Ibu Shreyasi, will come to you and then to Palio, but in a minute, that question and your closing remarks.
Sure. So I think that's a really provocative and interesting question. And we don't work with school students at Harappa, but of course I'm a parent and I have a son in middle school, so I'm not sure about them being much more intelligent. I think they know more and they can work many more machines faster. But I think it's really important to understand that I think with what the pandemic, especially and this complete move to online learning, especially for schools, have taught us parents all that school was a great bundled product, right? It's a daycare plus a sports center plus a recreation center plus a place where you polish and refine your interpersonal skills, when you learn discipline and regiment and routine. And I think in a true life skills education, I think each one of those has value. I don't think schools is just about imbibing content. And then just think about when you start to think about multiple intelligences. Is 10 plus 2 right? Is 9 plus 3 right? Is 8 plus 4 right? Right for whom? Right for what? Right for when? I think it's very, very difficult to substitute this system with one system that works for all. I think what would be really useful, and I think is to have these conversations and think from a first principles thinking into why does my child, for example, really need this system, right? And I think to be able to create, I think both for school systems as well as higher education systems and professional learning, multiple entry and exit points into back and forth into education, right? To say that you don't have to finish everything at one go. So for example, you can do a 1-year college leaving certificate or whatever, work for 5 years in an apprenticeship model, go back and then do a master's or a degree of depth, right? So I think what's more useful is in this great unbundling is for us to be able to chart truly unique paths where for a breadth of skills where I just need to be above average, right? I need to do a certain kind of basic minimum criteria. And then almost like in my model of a T zone or whatever, the vertical depths that I need to build in skills of my choice or my interest or my aspiration, I go deep and do longer term programs, right? I think systems move at glacial pace, and I think we've just gotten used to a system. But I do think that it's going to I do think it's going to change, and I don't want to put this onus just on educators. I think this onus is as much there on employers and parents to value the right things, because as educators we will we will tell educators to be progressive, but then as a parent you have to catch yourself and not go after your child for ensure that they get the right grades and do the right things. And employers also then have to be able to A, first value the kind of new skills that they want, and B, then have a fair system for measuring the kind of new skills that they have. So I think it's a very, very complicated solution if you had to really disrupt the system.
Thank you. Leo, if you could have the final word, we are absolutely at a hard stop.
Yeah. Thank you, Nalin. I think your provocative question, I don't think the right question is whether we need to shorten the time. I do believe that age-wise, just as you would say that a young person has a marriageable age, which is the right age to get married, I would say we don't need to shorten the time. I think the right question to ask is, what are we doing with that time? I think left to policymakers, it's Parkinson's law, right? Expand the curriculum to fill the time available. So that's why we learn benzene ring and periodic table and things that we never end up using with in life. So I think the question to ask is, what is the purpose of education? I think it would be foolish to assume that education's only purpose is to prepare people for careers, to prepare people for work. I think the question to ask is that education needs to prepare children for life. And I think that's what we need to ask ourselves is, are we spending time not just on knowledge, not just on skills, but also on values? And I think that's where the time is best spent, giving children the right things in that time that we're preparing them for both work as well as for life. Thanks, Nalin.
Well said, Leo. Thank you very much to all our panelists, Vikan, GUNAWAN, SHREYASI, Leo. Thank you very much. I think it was a very good session. Have a great day. Look forward to you joining us again sometime in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.